In Lesson 7 of the TrackerRMS Academy, we'll cover off timesheets and onboarding in the system. So first thing we're going to look at is putting on a job, and then we will go through converting that into a project, how to apply the default tasks in there, and then we'll walk through the timesheet process as well. So check out the admin videos as far as configuration of the timesheet settings in the onboarding settings. And here we're going to look at putting on a job in the system. So we'll go ahead and take John Henry as our hiring manager here. We'll open up his record and we'll use the touch bar here to create a job on the system. So one important thing if you're wanting to use timesheets is you're going to want to make sure to grab a job that has the ability to do timesheets against it. So you can select to have timesheets available or not, where a permanent one wouldn't have timesheets, where a contract one would. So we'll pick a contract position here. We'll just go over the basics here. Anybody wanting to learn more about the workflow of a job can watch the Working with Job Orders lesson. Here we'll just put on this job, hit Save and Continue to open it up. And then we're going to go in and we're going to quick pick our candidate into the system. So we're going to go into our shortlist and we'll add our candidate in, and we're just going to grab our candidate Sean to show how to make a placement here and make sure that the correct info is entered in. So one of the things here, once you've stepped through the workflow, you're going to want to make sure that the financials are entered in against that job. So this is where we would put in the correct pay and charge rate. This is also where you'd want to make sure to enter in the correct overtime rate. So it will pull through just the number on the left-hand side. You would need to manually put in any overtime, just in case there's any differences in hours. But it's important to enter in the correct information here because this will pull through to the timesheet portion of Tracker. You'll also want to make sure that in the General tab, you have the correct dates for this project. So if it's only a month-long position, you can leave it as the default, but if this was a longer contract, it's important to have these dates exact because this is how many days will be populated from the timesheets. So here, all we need to do to make our placement is change our candidate into an on-assignment status. Again, we'll want to ensure that the start date, end date, and your financials are correct. So here, when we hit Save and Close, it's going to update the job and the candidate to on assignment and placed filled. Now this is where we can go in and we can convert the project from the placed job. So if we go out into the touch bar, this is where at the very bottom we can hit Create Project. And what it will do is it will bring any contractors that are on assignment through into a project. Now if you are using multiple jobs, where you have multiple positions available, it would move anybody that's on assignment through. If you placed additional people inside of this job into on assignment, it would bring them automatically through into that project. So here, when I create the project, it's going to pop up a window that will ask you, do you want to create a new project record? When I hit OK, it's going to create a project on the system that I can link into from the blue icon here. Now, if there's any mandatory fields in the system, or if you see a red alert, it's just letting you know that that particular field would need to be updated in order to carry on. So here, we'll hit click here, and we'll go into our project record. Now, since we have automatically put in some defaults in the settings, this is where we'll see a number of different things. So under the tasks and activities, this is where the project team is going to be pre-populated. We also have the project planning tasks will pull through from that placement detail. So underneath the project planning tasks, this is where we'll have our holiday, our hours worked, and our overtime tasks that have been entered in as a default. We also have our start date and our end dates that have been entered in from the placement details. So you can go in and change any of these tasks, but if you are entering them in from the job, they're going to automatically pull through. So the next step in the process is going to be to make sure that your information is correct. Now, one of the things you may want to do is have some different columns here. So if you are wanting to customize the columns of the project, this is where we can always bring in any additional columns here. So for instance, if I wanted to see the end date and the start date inside of that column, I could easily bring those in. I could move them across, and I would be able to see the start date and the end date of that particular placement right from this view. So our next step inside of the project is going to be to populate the timesheets. So all we'll need to do to populate the timesheets on the system is to click on the candidate's name. This will take you out to their placement record, which is where we confirmed their status, their start date, their end date, and you'll go down to the Timesheets tab. So in the Timesheets tab, this is where the defaults for the system will pull through any records, but we can change this to something different if we want. So you can say, do we want timesheets? How many hours in a day are we using for reporting purposes? Do we want the clock in and out? Do we want it to be hours or days that they're entering? Or are we just going to have it be a time clock where they put in when they start and when they stop? So we'll go ahead and change this to a start and end time clock for this one. And utilization is where you can keep track of the percent that that person is being used. So if you have any short-term placements, or if you're more of kind of a consultancy model where you're going to be putting contractors on different jobs, you can keep track of what their utilization percent is to see if they can be used on other positions. So all we have to do to populate the timesheets is select the tasks that we want to show up inside of that candidate portal. We can select all of them, or if we don't want this particular candidate to have holiday, we could uncheck that. Now we'll go up and we'll hit Apply Changes and Populate Timesheets. What this will do is it will successfully populate the timesheet with those activities. So now if we close this window out and we go back and look at the candidate here, we can refresh our tasks and we'll see that now Sean Thomas has been assigned to those particular project tasks. I can use my quick link here for my timesheet, and if I click on that timesheet and open it up, we'll see that Sean now has the 3 tasks inside of his time portal here, and the time clocks will appear at the beginning of that project. So we have the time clock available on March 24th, and it will run all the way through to the end date of that particular timesheet. So this is how we can populate the timesheets inside of a project. Now the other thing that the project plan can be for is to also drop in any type of onboarding tasks as well. So here I can always add in any additional tasks or phases into the project. But if you have configured a project plan, you can go in here and we can apply a default task set that has been built out in the system. So if I click on this, since we have configured one in our admin lesson, I can grab my onboarding activity set that was built. I can say we want to apply it from the 24th of March. And when I hit Apply Set, what that's going to do is it's going to drop in our tasks that we want to track, which is just some simple tasks around, is their I-9 completed, is the application signed, and is their degree verified. So this can be built out so you could have 10, 20, as many tasks in here as you want. These tasks can be opened up. We can go in here and put in any notes as they're being progressed. Anybody that's assigned into the project team, you can allocate this task out if it has to go to the candidate directly. Once this is completed, you can go in and we can say that this has been completed. We can also update a start date, the end date of this. You can put a budgeted amount of hours or days against it. And then there is also the ability to enter in any financial info if you are tracking hours against this particular task. In this case, since we're just managing different aspects of the onboarding, it's as easy as changing that to completed, hitting save and close. And as soon as you refresh this table, we'll see that now we know that the I-9 has been completed and we can move on to our next task in the process. So this is how we can manage some of the onboarding pieces directly through the project. Now, let's say the degree verified isn't one that's applicable. We can go in and we can delete this activity out by hitting delete activity, hitting OK. And again, as soon as we refresh that page, we'll see that that is gone. Now, the other option that you have in here is you can also add in an additional task. So if there was one that we wanted to enter in, where we say, we want to get a W-4 signed, we can enter that in, and we can fill out as much information as we want. We could also just easily say save and close, and that task will be dropped in. If you want to reorder the tasks inside of this list, all you have to do is hit the arrows that go up and down. I can grab any one of these and I can drag it down. So my W-4 signed, I could bring right down here. I could also take this completed one if I wanted to move it to the very bottom of the list now that it's completed. And I can hit save order right from here. Now that will drop it in. You'll see that these have some blanks because we didn't enter in a start date and an end date. So if you wanted to go back and update that, you can go into that particular task and you could change any of those dates right from this field right here. So that's how we can apply a default task set into a project alongside our hours or just our standard tasks that we're creating. So next, we'll hop out and we'll look at how we can send out the portal information to Sean Thomas to let him know his details to log into Tracker. So this is where we can use our quick link, which points to the right of that candidate, which will take us out to Sean's candidate record. Inside of his candidate record, if we go into the timesheet and expense section, this is where we have the ability to say, do we want him to be a Tracker user? Yes or no. So if you ever are having issues logging in, you'll want to make sure that he is set up as a Tracker user. His username will be the email that's entered in here. The password will be the password that's entered into the password field. Now, if we look at the settings down below, this is where we can go and change some of the settings on a candidate level, where we can make it visible for him to see timesheets, expenses. We can have the ability to submit timesheet approvals directly through the portal. We can have a button to submit online documents, look at or upload documents into the system, and then also have access to the absence management portal. So if we want to open the candidate's timesheet, you have a number of links throughout Tracker, which will give you the internal timesheet that you can take a look at. You have it in the touch bar of the candidate as well. And then you also have it inside of the project with the time link. So the other thing that you'll have access to in the candidate record is the blue button, which will let you log on to the portal as the candidate themselves. So this is a great way to see if the password and the username works, where if you get any reports from candidates saying, I can't log in, I can't have access to the system, you can essentially log out from the portal, and you would be able to copy and paste the information from these two fields to test and verify that their portal details do work. So this is where you can go back to the candidate and you can say, Sean Thomas, I went ahead and verified your portal details are working fine. If you want to change the password, you can do it from there, and this is where they'll have access to their full portal. So this is where we can configure all these settings. Now to send the timesheet out and their portal details, you'll go into the touch bar, and this is where there's a template that has been pre-built for you. In the candidate folder here, we'll go in and we'll grab our portal login detail template. We'll hit preview to pull up that particular template. And this is going to go out to the candidate that's on the system. We have the email and the username entered in. The one thing you'll want to make sure that has been configured is the link to your direct portal. So in the admin lesson 9, it does go over how this can be configured to set up the click here link. All we would need to do to send out the details to this candidate is hit send a template, and it would send the email out to the candidate that they could log into the portal using just this email. So now, if there was any changes, you could make it in here, and we could always resend that template out to update the candidate's information. But as far as managing the timesheet process, now we can take a look at the portal and go over how the candidate is going to be entering in their time. So in this portal, you'll have the timesheets. You also have the expenses section. You have the online documents, where any documents that you're making available in the document library will show up here. The candidate also has the ability to upload files that will backfill into Tracker. The absence management portion is going to cover how they can book in absences. They can change their portal password, and then of course they can hit the red log off button. So we'll click on My Timesheet, and we'll take a look at how the candidate is going to be entering in time into the system. So here you'll see that we've selected our time clock option. So all we would have to do is go to our hours worked task, which is going to be against our project and show the company in there. We can click on our clock, which will pop up our default here. The times that display are going to be the start and end times that are a default on the system. Now this is where if the candidate worked anything different, we could go in and we could either select from the drop-down, or we could just simply type in the time that we worked if it was 4 p.m. Now I could go down to my lunch breaks, and this is where they would enter in the different breaks that they took. So if we took a break from 10:30 to 11 o'clock, this is where we could enter that in, and you would see the time would update to show that we've worked 6.5 total hours. So they would put their start and end time for the entire day, and then they would break out any breaks down here. So if I hit OK, it's going to save that time in, so you'll see the raw time there. Now the candidate can go back in and click on that to put in any notes, or to go in and identify or change any time that they booked in. So you'll see that there's a legend down below that shows the different options here. So since it's blue, it is pending. Now the candidate would continue to book their time against the line item or the tasks that are in here. So a couple different things that you'll see. Save timesheet would save the timesheet into Tracker so that it would backfill, but it does not submit it over to the client or internally. Rebuild would be if a timesheet was denied or approved and you needed to basically reset that action. That's where you would hit the rebuild button. Submit for approval would take that timesheet and send it directly to the client. Now, add timesheet line is where you can add any additional lines of time in if there's a need to have anything additional than the default tasks. So this would need to be an internal project that you would add on to the system, but the majority of candidates are going to book against the standard pieces that you're entering in. So we'll put in some additional time in here for the rest of the week. We'll go in and say on this particular day, we can enter in any additional time here. So we'll go out onto Friday and we'll book some additional time from 9 to 5. We'll leave the lunch break blank on this one. And this is where we can also enter in any overtime in the overtime line if there's been overtime for the entire week. So now we'll go ahead and close this out. But before we do that, we'll submit the approval just like the candidate would. So if I submit the approval, what you would get is the candidate gets a window that pops up and it says, please select what you're wanting to submit. I would click the box and then hit submit for approval. That timesheet would go and it would submit either directly to the client or internally into Tracker, depending on how you've set up the system. So here, when the page refreshes, you would see it would turn to a yellow icon, letting them know that that time has been submitted. If we go out of the candidate portal, we can go back into the project here. And inside of that project, we have a number of different things that we'll see. So here, we're going to have our timesheet block, which is where we can see the time that's being booked in against the particular days. We can also go down into the profile section and see all of the additional pieces about that project. Under our tasks and activities, this is where we can start to see what's been booked in against this particular job. And we can see the time that's been booked out against each of the tasks. So where you're going to be managing this is inside of the finance section of Tracker. You have your timesheets block. The timesheets block is where you can go out and you have 4 different modules here. So the first one is going to show all of your timesheets that are on the system. So this is where you have a filter that you can look at so that you can pick the date range that you're wanting to see timesheets for. You can also change it to where you can show timesheets for a specific company on the system. When you hit Show Timesheets, it will apply that filter. So the legend here will let you know what the 4 different entry types in Tracker equal, if there's any confusion on what those types of entries are. Here we'll see that Project 1002, we have Sean Thomas, we have our project contact. Now inside of the project, your main contact is going to be where the timesheet approvals potentially will go out to. So if we go back and look at our project, we're going to see 2 different things. So in the profile section, this is where when the project is created, we have the project manager will pull through the job owner. We have the delivery contact will pull through the primary contact from the job. Now the delivery contact is going to be where the timesheet approvals go off to. The commercial contact is going to be where any invoices or any billing is sent to from the actual invoices itself. So if we hop back into that timesheet module, this is where we can see that there have been 2 entries that were submitted. We can see here there's 2 entries. The total time was 14.5. And we can look to see the timesheet icon here to see what was booked in. We can also go in and look to see in the preview eye here that there is a total of 14.5 hours over 2 days. So there's a couple different things you'll see. So in the emailed request section, since this is set inside the portal to go directly to the client, you'll see here that this is showing that it was submitted at 13:35, so 1:35 today. John Henry's who it went to, and it's showing in a status of requested. So once it's been approved by, you'll see that update here. If they put any comments or questions, you would see that show up right here. So when the client gets the email, they're going to get a simple email that would show them how they can approve or deny that with the click of a button. That's going to be that same template that's set up. The client would simply get that particular email. When that email comes in, and I will show you guys what it looks like in the templates here. The client, all they would have to do is from that email, they would have the time inside of it. They would be able to approve it or deny that within a click of a button. Those timesheet requests can be sent directly from the candidate. They can also be sent out from the timesheet module by going in, and you would have a box here for anything that hasn't been submitted. You could select one at a time or multiples, and you would hit the send request buttons in the upper right-hand side, which would send any selected timesheet requests out. So in the emailed request section, this is where you would see the overall progress. So if it had been approved or denied, that would show right inside of here. Now the manual authorization form is where I can go in, and if you have a client that has any issues, or if we have a client that for whatever reason isn't interested in participating in electronic timesheets, you can go in here. You have the project showing. It's important here that you're going to select the date range and apply the filter so it can update on this screen. This is where I can see the date from and to of when the submittal was sent. I can also go in and look at the company. I can find a particular candidate, or I can filter by a project or a candidate itself. So if I want to refresh this to look at timesheets from the 21st to the 27th here, I would be able to go in and override any entries that were sitting there at a pending status. So since this one has been submitted, it is waiting for the email request to come in. But in the manual authorization form, this is where we could authorize any time that hadn't been submitted yet or that was sitting in a pending status. So the missing timesheet section, this is where any time that should be booked in where you have a project. So here we have a different project for a SQL developer. that should have time booked in, and this is letting you know that there's a timesheet that's missing. So this candidate, if we look at the timesheet, they're on assignment for this week, but there hasn't been any time booked in for the different parameters that you put into this filter here. So this is going to be a red flag that you would know I need to reach out to Andrew and let him know we don't have any time entered for you yet here. So if we go back into this project and we want to book in some time, this is where I can go into Andrew's timesheet. We'll do a little bit of a different example here. So if I just entered in this case, this is what you would see if you were using just the hours or days of entry, where you would just simply enter in the amount of time that was worked, hit Save Timesheet. Now for Andrew, this is an example where he doesn't have the ability to submit directly to the candidate or to the client from the portal because that button has been turned to no. So Andrew would just simply enter in his time. When he's done, he would hit close. What you would see in Tracker for this particular example, if I go into the timesheets, is I have Andrew Moore, and now I'm going to have the box next to my name that I can click. And here, all I would need to do is go out and hit Send Requests, and this would take Peter Jones, and it would send Andrew's time for him to approve. So if I go down to the manual authorization form, this is where, for the SQL developer position, if I click on and access that, since this one has not been submitted yet, I can go in and I can approve, I can deny the timesheet, or I can leave it at pending. This is also where you can make any changes to the booked time, which is the physical time that's entered into the timesheet, the billable time, which is going to mirror that unless there's any changes where you have a difference in the two. But if I wanted to go in and approve this, all I would have to do is click the green checkboxes, hit Save Changes, and that would save those in that manual authorization form. If I go back and look at my timesheets, you would see that now we have 3 entries that are approved in the system that now are sitting there and they're ready to go. So this is how you're going to send the timesheets out to the clients and manage the timesheets from here. Now, of course, you can always use the reporting section to build any type of custom reports that you want to manage your timesheets as well.